this is Michael Park for CreativeCow.net, and let me welcome you to this video tutorial on how to recreate the famous Bond intro sequence. Here's a little clip of what we will be creating today. Bond walking across the screen. That's my friend Ron. I want to give him a big thanks for letting me use this footage in the tutorial. As you can see, this is the style from the old James Bond movies, which is, you know, all the way up through the end of the Pierce Brosnan era. I like this look. The new version of Bond, starring Daniel Craig, uses a different style gun barrel, but hey, we're going to be doing this one in this tutorial, so let's go ahead and get started. I will go ahead and delete all this stuff and start fresh. Okay, we're going to kind of break this up into two main pre-compositions. The first one being the white circles coming across the screen, and the second one being the actual gun barrel tracing Bond across. So let's go ahead and start on the first composition. I'm going to be working at 800 by 450. I'll call this composition Opening Circles, and it's going to be 5 seconds long at 24 frames a second. Alright, let's go ahead and pop a new layer down here. We'll call this Main Circle. It doesn't matter what the color is. So let's go ahead and put a Generate Circle on here, and voila, there's our circle. Let's bump the radius down to 35, which will be a little more in keeping with the size that we want versus the size of the composition. And we're going to animate this circle going across the screen here. So let me get a little more room to work here. There we go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new null object, layer, new, null object, and this is what we're going to be using to animate the center position of the circle. So we'll come in here and hit P for position, and I'm going to come down here to about 10 frames, click the position, and I'm going to have to bring back up this a little bit, and I'm going to take this over to -50. That'll give us enough room to get this circle all the way off screen. I'm going to come all the way down here to the very end, about 14, 16 or so, and go 850, which is all the way off the screen. So now we've got this null object moving linearly across the screen, which is what we want. Now what I'm going to do is pick whip the center by hitting Alt click, left click stopwatch, the center position of the circle effect to the null object, and we'll call this circle position control. Alright, so now we have the circle coming across, which is great. The reason why I used a null object is we're going to be duplicating this layer and using it to create that kind of ghosting effect coming across. And if you were to go into your project later on and want to change the timing to fit music, whatever else, all you need to do is change your null object position, timing, and all the rest of the circles will stay exactly in the right synchronization. So it makes a lot of sense to go ahead and set this up first. Alright, well, there's a couple different ways you could do the ghosting that we saw earlier, with the circle kind of stopping there and being on screen for a few seconds and then dropping off, or actually more like a few frames. One way would be just to duplicate the layer and manually input all of the center positions, but we've kind of defeated that purpose because we've linked the center position to the circle position, and like I said, we want to be able to adjust this on the fly. So what I'd like to do is basically duplicate the layer and freeze frame everything. But if you'll notice, you try to select the layer with the circle effect and hit layer, time, and freeze frame, it's grayed out and you can't use it. Fortunately, what we can do is work around this and pre-compose this. So we can hit layer, pre-compose, and call this main circle Precomp, and move all attributes in a new composition. What we're going to have to do though is relink the circle position to the null object, it's going to give me an error, but bear with me. There's the error. And what we can do then is drag this over and just relink this. So we'll go to the effects, circle, and the center here. We can alt click it, slide this over. There we go. And we'll drag this over to this, and we're back in business. Now we can close out that precomp, drag this back over, and as you can see, we're right back where we started, which is great. Now we can go ahead and duplicate the layer. I'm going to rename the layer Ghost 01, and we want 6 of these, so I'm going to duplicate by hitting Control D, all 6. Now we can come over and start doing the animation. So at frame 15 is maybe 16 is where I want the first ghost to show up, and these are all linked to this null object. I can now come up here and go Layer, Time, Freeze Frame, and it's going to stop, which is exactly what we want. Now all we've got to do is take care of the transparency. So make sure you're on the freeze frame frame. Hit T. Click the opacity. Now if you hit page up, you'll go back 1 frame and set the opacity to 0. You go page down to go back to the original frame. Hit shift page down to go over 10 frames. Set a keyframe, and then go page down 1 more time, and then go to 0. Now we're just going to repeat this over and over again for all 6 layers. Freeze frame, hit T for transparency, and set a keyframe, page up, set it down to 0, page down, shift page down, set a keyframe, don't forget to do that, page down, 0, and there we go. Now if we hit 0 and do a quick RAM preview, make sure we didn't mess anything up. Looks good. Alright, so that's now done. Now, for example, if you wanted to go back and adjust the position of the null and you need to go faster across the screen, all you need to do is adjust the position of the null and everything should update. Exactly. Pretty handy, because if you didn't have all that linked to the null, then what would happen is your main circle would be moving faster and the ghosting wouldn't line up the way it should. So we'll just go ahead and drag this back to kind of where it was. We'll go here 14, and we'll go down here to 14 or so. Yep, looks alright. So let's go on to step 2. Let's go ahead and start a new composition, and what we're going to be doing first is the barrel groove precomp. So we'll call this black groove. Set the composition to 800 by 800, and now we want these to be 15, not 5. Hit OK. Let's go layer new solid, and we're going to call this BG for background. Just click a blue or whatever, it doesn't really matter. You're just going to have this so you can see what you're working with. Otherwise you'd be putting black grooves over black and you wouldn't be able to tell what's going on. We need another new solid. This time we need to make this oversize so that when we rotate it 45 degrees it'll take up the whole composition. Once again, this doesn't really matter what color it is, but we'll just go black anyway, and we'll call this black groove layer and hit OK. And let's kind of zoom out here. What I want to do is change this to a guide layer so it won't show up in the other compositions. Now what we want to do is go Effect, Generate Grid, and this is how we're going to be oops, I did that on the wrong layer. So let's make sure our black groove layer is set and go Grid. Alright, this is what we're going to be using to generate our grooves here. So first thing we need to do is change the size from corner point to width and height sliders. Change the width, in my case, to 141, and change the height to 1200. And I would just 1200 so it's longer than the 1132. And we need to get rid of this line in the middle or else it'll look cross-hatched in the gun barrel. So the way we do that is change the anchor point up to 0, and it just shifts that line up. Change the border to 8, and now we want to change the color to black. One final thing we want to do is select the layer, hit R for rotate, and rotate it 45 degrees. And as you can see, it lines up right on the corners, which is what we want. Going back in the project window here, we're going to duplicate this layer by hitting Control D, and we're going to call this white groove. And what this is going to be are kind of the highlights. Very important, double click this and make sure you're in the white groove, and select the black groove layer and rename it to white groove layer. If you really are, want to keep things straight, you can adjust this to a white solid so you don't get anything confused. And then go to the effects control, and the only thing we're going to change here is change this to 4, the border, the color to white, and the anchor point to 568. And all that did was shift these lines down a hair. Okay, let's go ahead and start our barrel. We'll go composition, new composition. We'll call this barrel Precomp. And we're going to go back to our 800 by 450. 15 seconds looks good. And we're going to drag our black groove Precomp and our white groove Precomp in. And we're going to go ahead and grab one of our solid layers here, and we can just reuse that so we can see what's going on. So let's start with the black groove. What we're going to do is apply the perspective CC cylinder effect. Now it looks kind of like we have a helix or a DNA strand. We need to rotate this 90 degrees. So now it looks like we're looking down the barrel of the gun, which is what we want. It's a little too far away, so let's go ahead and adjust the position. And we're going to be adjusting the Z position here to negative 470 or so. And it brings it much closer, which is what we want. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and hit Control C to duplicate or copy and then paste this over. And we've got the white is lining up on the wrong side of the black. The way I'm going to fix that is, there's two ways to do it. I can just adjust the position here, or I can go back in the Precomp and adjust the lines. Let's just go ahead and do it here. We'll go minus 474. Let's try that. Not quite enough. Let's go a little more. Minus 478. Yeah, that looks good. Okay. And next thing we need to do is add a new distortion effect. We're going to use the warp, and the warp style will be a twist, and the bend is going all the way out to 100, just to kind of flatten this out a little bit and give us some perspective. Once again, hit Control C on the white groove, hit Control V, and it should, switch this from arc to twist. And is that 100? And that looks good. Okay. Alright, now we need to go ahead and import some of our footage. We're going to go ahead and drop the footage in and put it on top, or put it below the grooves. As you can see, it's going to look pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and move the top and turn off the eye. What I'm going to do now is give us a new solid layer, and we'll call this Circle Alpha. And what this is going to be is an alpha channel, or actually a luma mat for our footage. And instead of trying to put everything on top and compose it that way, I'm actually just going to cut out a circle of the footage that I want to use as the hole in the gun, and that's the way we're going to kind of simulate that. I'm going to add the circle effect again, and this time I'm going to put the radius up to 130. which looks about right. And I'm going to turn the football movie back on and change the track matte from none to Luma Matte Circle Alpha. And there you go. While we're sitting here, I don't need red, I would need a black background. So I'm going to go ahead and change this layer solid settings in the background to black. And I'm going to call it black background. Okay. Alright, now let's kind of deal with the motion here and line all this stuff up before we go any further with the reflection. What I'm going to do now is create a new null layer. Make sure you have your composition selected. And I'm going to basically get rid of this for now. And go layer, new, null. And I'm going to use this to track across the movement of the actor. And I can get rid of this and bring up position, P. We'll go back to the very beginning and take off the track matte here so we can see what's going on better. And I'm going to move the null all the way over here off screen to where the actor would be. And I'm going to turn on the stopwatch. Give some more room. And as he's coming across, I'm going to go just to the point where he turns and fires. And I'm going to move the null position over to dead center. And now let's see how we did with our tracking. Not too bad, but we can probably adjust this over a little bit. Alright, I think that works well. I can live with that. Okay, so now we can go ahead and redo our track matte with our circle alpha. And we're going to come down just like we did before in the effect here, and the center we're going to alt click, create an expression, and we're going to pick whip this to the null. There we go. So now this comes over, but the problem is we don't have any of the grooves coming over and tracking along. So the best way to handle that, you can simply parent the grooves to the null object, and now they should line up. That's exactly what we want. One other minor thing here, as you can see, the white lines go all the way over here and kind of cut off sharply. I want this to look like the light's reflecting in at a 45-degree angle. Yeah, you could go and create all kinds of masks and everything else, but let's go ahead and use the built-in features of CC Cylinder to make this more realistic, or the way we want it. So we'll come back in here to the white groove layer, go to the effect controls, and go to the light. And I'm going to increase the light to 150. I'm going to increase or decrease the light height to 20. Leave it at a 45-degree angle. And now the shading's where we're going to change this. Now it has ambient at 50% right now, or a value of 50, which if you bring it all the way up, basically everything's really, really bright. We don't want any ambient whatsoever. We want the light to create all the shadows. And as you can see, that's exactly what it did, and that looks good to me. So now as it tracks over, you don't really see anything, and then it comes into screen. That looks good. Alright, let's go ahead and deal with the reflection now. We'll grab the barrel reflection, we'll drag it down here on top of the background, and what I'm going to use is a little expression, because what I've noticed in some of the more recent Bond films, up until obviously they changed the style of the barrel intro, is that the reflection moved over at a different rate than the actual barrel did, and it looked to me to be about a 2-to-1 ratio. And so what I'm going to do is create a little expression to basically do that automatically, so you don't have to keyframe everything. And just like in the circle precomp that we did earlier, this way if you go and adjust the position of the null object, for example, when we go make this thing go back and forth into the corner here, the position of the reflection will automatically update. So what we need to do is alt click on position, and give ourselves a little more room to write a little bit of an expression here. And what I'm going to first do is declare a couple variables. So I'm going to go x equals, this isn't absolutely necessary, it just makes things seem a little cleaner. X is the position of the x, or the x position of the null, semicolon, return. Y is going to equal the y position of the null object, 225 at present, semicolon. And now we're going to write our expression. And what I want to do is basically take the center value, or the value of the center of the composition, and figure out how far away the null object is. And that distance I want to double offset the reflection here. So the way we're going to do that is basically start with the center of the x portion of the composition, which is 400. And to that, I'm going to add the 400, which is the center again, and this will be the distance between the null and the center of the composition, minus x, close parentheses, and I want to double that, so I'm going to multiply it by 2, and then close parentheses, comma. Now we'll do the same thing with the y, which will be 225 plus parentheses y, 225 minus y, all that multiplied, times 2, and in bracket. And if we've done everything right, this will shift up. Well, I didn't do it right. I meant to put minus. Yeah, I tell you what, it's late at night. It's been a long day at work, so I apologize. All right, yeah, that's what we want right there. That looks good. If you want to, you can add a little bit of a rotation. I don't think it's necessary, but that's just, personal preference. That looks good. And let's see, what else? Oh yeah, I want to create kind of a little bit of a distortion here at the end of the gun barrel. So what I'm going to do is create a new adjustment layer. And I'm going to move it down just above the reflection. The only thing I want distorted is the reflection itself. I'm going to move to the middle, and I'm going to create an elliptical mask. What I'm going to do is drag the mask with the adjustment layer selected, hit shift to make sure your circle is truly a circle, not an oval. Then you can adjust the mask position. Right? And before we go any further, it's probably a good idea to go ahead and parent this adjustment layer to the null, so it moves along with the layer, so it stays in the center of the barrel. I think I can probably adjust this just a hair this way. Alright, and the next thing we're going to do is feather the mask. We'll feather it about 25 pixels. And then we'll go Effect, Distort, Turbulent Displace, and we'll set the amount to maybe 80. Might be a bit much, but we'll see. Set this to 15 perhaps, and we'll go across and see what it looks like. Not too bad. Maybe 80 is a bit much. We'll dial it down to 60. Okay, that looks good. So we kind of pretty much have the barrel portion of this thing licked. You could change the transfer mode of the white grooves to, I don't know, like add if you wanted to get a sharper look there, or you could change it to screen or lighten. I like lighten, that looks good. Okay, so that's kind of that portion there. Last thing we need to do is to continue animating the null. After Bond turns and fires, you kind of have a thing where blood starts trickling down. Then about 9 seconds, he starts kind of wavering back and forth. So we'll set a keyframe about 9, move over, drag the null ever so slightly over this way, move down a few more frames, drag the null back this way and maybe a little bit down. Once again, move a few frames, drag it back this way and maybe a hair down, and then it ends for him. So we'll drag all the way in and drag the barrel down to the corner. Okay. As it goes to the corner, we want the circle to go to white, and we want the reflection and everything else to go to basically be transparent. So we can go ahead and grab these layers and then hit T, and here we're going to set an opacity keyframe back up just a hair. We'll have them go off here. So we'll go opacity, set them all to 0, and then we'll come back up here, maybe right after it gets off of bond, and we'll go to make sure these are all selected again. And let's set the opacity up to 100, which looks good. And while we're at it, the only way to blow this really out to white, let's just use another circle effect. So we'll duplicate the circle alpha. We'll rename this circle white, and we'll bring up the transparency of this, and we'll kind of inverse this. So we'll go from opacity, turn it on, the opacity from 0%, and then we'll move down to where these are 0 and bring the opacity up to 100. So now it's kind of like a little bit of a crossfade, which looks good. All right. Last thing I want to do in this pre-comp is, if you can see, it's kind of a sharp edge here. The film, it looked like it had kind of a black ring around there, and the easiest way to accomplish that is to, once again, Control D or duplicate the circle alpha layer. Let's rename this circle rim and turn it on so you can see it. And up here in the circle effect, go to edge thickness, and we'll dial the thickness down to about 2 and change the color to black. And there's your rim. If you want to feather it just a hair, you can feather this to, I don't know, make it look a little more refined, I guess. Alright, that looks good. So let's go ahead and put this composition together. So go composition, new composition. We'll call this final comp. Set the duration to 20. Hit OK. And we'll drop the opening circles pre-comp in. And we'll drop in the barrel pre-comp, and we'll come down here and zoom in and line this up. There we go. Excellent. Now we need to add the blood. So we will do a new layer, solid, call this blood to keep it straight. And this time we want kind of a mid to deep red. Hit OK. We're going to change the transfer mode to multiply. And where we want to basically start this coming down is right after he fires here. So it's right about here. And we're going to basically use a mask to do this. Make sure your blood layer is selected and grab the pen tool. And we're just going to create some undulating bottom to this, and if you click, hold, and drag, it'll create the Bezier curves. And now what I want to do is hit M for mask and click the mask path here to set keyframes. Now I want to select only the bottom and scrub down here in time to right about now. That looks good. And grab one of these points and drag the whole mask down. Now if you want to be a little more of a perfectionist, you can come back in here and basically grab individual points and make them Some go a little faster, some go a little slower, just to give it some, variation. And drag it down a little more. Maybe this comes down fast. This drops fast. This comes over this way. A little faster. This drops. It slows down a bit. Alright. Not too bad there. Okay. And kind of to finish this whole thing out, where the circle starts turning white and all this stuff starts going to transparent, we want to do the same thing with the red mask. So what I'm going to do is hit the T for opacity and set a keyframe, drive it over here, set that to 0, and there we go, it fades out. One other thing to do with regard to the mask here, it's pretty sharp edge. You can take care of that real easily by simply feathering it 2 pixels. It just gives it a much, softer look. If you really want to kind of kick it up a notch, let's just add a little bit of a muzzle flash here. So right about the time, looks like right about there is when he'd be firing. So let's add a new layer, solid. We'll call this flash. Whoops, didn't mean to hit enter there. I want this to be about 50 by 50 pixels. We'll make this kind of a bright yellow. Okay. Go ahead and move this up. We'll make this a little transparent so we can see what we're doing. And let's take the pen tool. We're just going to mask out kind of a little flash shape. I doubt a pistol would make that big of a muzzle flash, but hey, you know what? This is my world, so in my world it does. And we'll change the feathering out just a hair, like so. And let's add a little bit of a glow effect, stylize, glow. Change the threshold a bit. And then we'll change the transfer mode to add. Alright. And we only want this to show up for 1 frame, so let's go ahead and instead of keyframing the opacity, we're just going to decrease the layer size, or the layer time, to 1 frame only. And there we got it. Okay. Well, let's do a quick RAM preview and see what we have. See how we did here. I think it looks pretty good. So now you too can be James Bond. Once again, check out all the great tutorials at creativecow.net. Thanks again for listening, and I look forward to doing some more tutorials in the future. For those of you who like the new version of the Bond gun barrel, if you leave enough nice comments for me, I might be persuaded to do a 3D Max tutorial on how to create the new effect. So if you're interested in that, let me know, and hopefully we can get that one done for you too soon. Thanks again, and God bless.